Welcome everyone to Connected Lands+Waters. This is a joint program of the Garden Club of Jacksonville, the Nature Conservancy, and Groundwork Jacksonville. My name is Denise Reagan. I'm the Executive Director of the Garden Club of Jacksonville, and I'm here with Daniel Stark, our Operations Manager, who's handling a lot of the Zoom duties today, and Christina Kittle, who is our Administrative Assistant, who's also handling some administrative and other duties on Zoom. And we're very happy to be with all of you here today. I'd like to thank the Jessie Ball DuPont Fund for making virtual programs like this one possible. We couldn't do it without a generous grant from the Jessie Ball DuPont Fund. And because of that grant, we've been able to put on virtual programs starting May of last year. So we've been doing these for a full year now. And you can go to our blog at GardenClubJax.org/blog and look up virtual programs and see some of the mini recordings that we've done over the last year. These are just a few of them. And if you're not already a member of the Garden Club of Jacksonville, why not? Why don't you become a member? And we'll give you some information about how to join in the chat. With that, I would like to thank Renate Hixon of the Late Bloomers Garden Club, whose idea it was to hold this program. She's been intimately involved not only with the Garden Club of Jacksonville and Late Bloomers Garden Club, but also with the North Florida Land Trust and the Nature Conservancy to protect the many lands and waters that we'll be talking about today. And maybe she'll wave to us. All right. And if you have questions for our speakers today, please post them in the chat, and then we will pose them to the speakers at the end of the program. With that, I would like to introduce Kay Ehas. Kay joined Groundwork Jacksonville as CEO in 2017. Since then, she has been relentless in her pursuit of achieving Jacksonville's 100-year-old vision of an emerald necklace of trails, linear parks, and restored creeks that encircle the urban core. Under Kay's leadership, Groundwork Jacksonville became the city's nonprofit partner in designing the 30-mile Emerald Trail that will connect 14 of our city's historic urban neighborhoods to downtown, and will link 16 schools, 2 colleges, and 21 parks, with an additional 13 schools and 17 parks located within 3 blocks of the trail. Please welcome Kay Ehas. Kay?
In 2013, community members and former Mayor Alvin Brown partnered to apply to bring a Groundwork Trust to Jacksonville, specifically because the city had struggled for decades with cleaning up its urban land and waterways. We have both federal and local key partners. The National Park Service and the Environmental Protection Agency provide funds to Groundwork USA to start up local trusts. And both of these federal agencies provide us ongoing support and advocacy, and we remain available to them as needed. The equity work we are engaged in as a result of the Mccoy's Creek project will be included in the EPA's Southeast Region Brownfields brochure, and we're pretty proud of that. The City of Jacksonville is, of course, our key local partner because almost everything we do is on city-owned land, and because we need local public dollars to help us get it done. Groundwork's mission is to literally clean up the ground and water in underserved neighborhoods and transform them into public spaces that everyone can enjoy, while providing green infrastructure that makes us more resilient and provides habitat for wildlife. It's proven that connecting people to the outdoors, to nature, and to each other improves our overall well-being. More than anything, we want our work to lead to increased prosperity for longtime residents. Our playground, so to speak, is the 16 square miles that contain Jacksonville's urban neighborhoods. It includes 2 creeks that are each 3 miles long. Within the 2 watersheds, there are 218 acres of parks. There are also 638 acres of vacant land, with the city owning 149 of those. That gives us an opportunity to add parks in areas where there are none today, and to add green infrastructure throughout the watersheds to improve water quality before it gets to the creeks and ultimately to the St. Johns River. Key to our mission is engaging communities as our partners in project design and in the bigger goal of neighborhood revitalization. 71% of residents living in the Emerald Trail neighborhoods are low income, and 36% are living in poverty. Groundwork raised private funds to develop the Emerald Trail Master Plan, and the City Council adopted it in March of 2019. When complete, as Denise said, it will be 30 miles of contiguous trails and linear parks and includes the ecological restoration of Mccoy's and Hogan's Creeks. As you can see, the Emerald Trail is a major connector, connecting neighborhoods to each other downtown and the river and to schools and parks. The solid green lines show existing trails, so the S-Line Rail Trail and the River Walk. The light green dotted lines were already planned projects within the city's capital improvement project budget. And the shared use path next to the Fuller Warren Bridge connecting Riverside to San Marco is being funded and constructed by the Florida Department of Transportation and will be open later this summer. The dark green dotted lines are the new trails that we will design and build, which are approximately 20 miles. Here's Mccoy's Creek, and here is Hogan's Creek. This is a before and after rendering of the first trail segment that will be under construction in late summer. This is a city retention pond. Jacksonville has a lot of them, and most of them are not adding value to the surrounding area because of how they are designed. Where we connect to retention ponds, our goals are to aquascape them, which is the art of adding native plants to a water environment. The city currently relies on chemicals to control weeds and algae. Plants will improve the water quality, protect the shoreline, and provide food and habitat for wildlife. The city of Jacksonville is investing in improving this park, which will be along the first segment of the Emerald Trail called Florida Dwight Park. One of our goals is to make every park the trail connects to a great park. These pictures show you how dramatically we are changing the urban landscape. We are using native plants and trees. Greening up our urban core is integral to the design of the Emerald Trail. It's important for user comfort and for the birds and the bees, and also to help with stormwater runoff. Mccoy's Creek currently is polluted. It floods even during normal rainfall events, and the infrastructure is failing. The photo on the right shows trusses that are there to hold up the bulkhead. And most people don't even know it exists. It's not accessible and not visible for most of its 3 miles. And the mouth of the creek, as it enters the river, is buried underground. More than anything, the restoration of Mccoy's Creek is a social justice and equity project. This playground equipment is the only recreational amenity within a 30-acre city park called Hollybrook Park. All of the neighborhood's recreational amenities were taken away over the years and replaced with retention ponds that then did not solve the flooding problem. We are taking a straightened and hardened creek back to a natural stream. We're expanding the creek's floodplain by removing a road and acquiring 18 acres of vacant land. The project is a resiliency project as well as a habitat restoration project. Natural channel design and riparian corridor pattern and dimension are self-organizing and self-sustaining and intrinsically resilient to climate change. The restoration of Mccoy's Creek is an incredibly exciting project. The city has committed $105 million for the creek project. As we said, Mccoy's Creek along with Hogan's Creek are part of the Emerald Trail system and will be the jewels of that trail system. There will be 3 different types of streams. On the left, this is the headwater area of the creek. We affectionately call it the branches. It will be shallow, narrow, and meandering where kids can play in it. The branches are located within the 30-acre Hollybrook Park. And by the way, the branches are not part of the city's Mccoy's Creek project, so is a Groundwork Jacksonville project to fully design and construct. I'm happy to report that the branches restoration design is 100% complete. Its trail design will be completed by the fall, and we intend to go after a large federal construction grant that will fund 75% of the project. And when we are awarded the grant, the city has agreed to fund the additional 25%. So as the creek enters the main stem heading east to the St. Johns River, it is a series of lagoons, connected lagoons and wetlands to add storage capacity. These water bodies are purposely situated so residents can walk down their street to water. There will be a series of unique habitats such as cypress coves. This phase of the creek from just west of King Street up to I-95 will be under construction in the next month. By the CSX rail line, it opens up into a 60-foot wide channel all the way to the river. Here at the end is where it's buried underground currently. And then the hot pink line that you see here is the Emerald Trail, which follows the creek. This is one of 3 park spaces planned within the branches section of the creek. You can see how people will be able to interact with the creek. There will be both passive and active recreation in the area where the 2 branches come together, as it has the most available land. This pond will be connected to the creek for overflow. The cool thing about it is that instead of the traditional pipe from a pond to a creek, you'll have a natural step pool channel that will provide additional treatment before it enters the creek. The picture on the top left shows you where the creek is today. The forest to the north of the creek is private property owned by Bellingham Marine. Below that, you can see that we are relocating the creek to the north, and the city will have a permanent easement with Bellingham that will keep most of that forested land public land. When the waters are high, there are areas that fish can access to safely lay eggs away from predators. These are the 3 fish nurseries. As the waters recede, these fish nurseries isolate juvenile fish until they can survive on their own in the creek. The rendering on the right shows the trail going by one of the fish nurseries. On the left is an aerial view of the buried creek. It actually goes right in between these buildings. And right here is where it's daylighted, and this is where the trusses are holding back the bulkhead. In the mid-1960s, so it was only buried under Riverside Avenue originally. And then in the mid-1960s, Morris Communication acquired the property and buried the creek in a 42-foot wide culvert. Needless to say, that greatly exacerbated the flooding problems upstream. It also prevents fish from entering the creek. We have a grant from NOAA specifically to design the section of the creek and daylight it. So everywhere we go, we're asked how the Emerald Trail will be maintained. People expect it to be maintained at a really high level, as do we. By March of 2022, we will have a maintenance agreement in place between Groundwork and the city, identifying the responsibilities of each organization for maintenance. How we are going to handle maintenance is to recruit, hire, train, and employ residents from the Emerald Trail neighborhoods. They'll be trained on higher level maintenance scales, such as gardening, not just mow, blow, and go, which is what the city does. Also recall the hundreds of acres of vacant land throughout the watersheds. We have received a substantial grant from the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity to develop a watershed plan for the Mccoys and Hogan's Creek watersheds. The Emerald Trail stewards will be responsible for implementing green infrastructure throughout these watersheds. We'll be working with 10 neighborhoods to develop the plan. Our watershed plan will be the first one ever in the city of Jacksonville. So we believe the Emerald Trail is going to have an incredibly significant impact on overall quality of life for the neighborhoods adjacent to the trail, but also provide an incredible amenity for all Jacksonville residents and visitors. It's going to have a huge economic impact. For example, the Atlanta Beltline has an ROI of 10 to 1. What I personally love the most about this project is how it connects people, both to other people in the outdoors. Our urban neighborhoods are rich in history and architecture. The Emerald Trail will bring folks into areas of Jacksonville they've never been in before. It has the potential to mix people from different races and economic backgrounds like never before. Thank you very much.
One of the ways that I personally am involved with them is I participate in the once monthly cleanups that Groundwork does, and it's a great way to meet other people who share your vision. So please get involved with Groundwork Jacksonville. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. We're going to pose them to Kay and Lindsay afterward, but now we're going to move on to Lindsay's part of the talk. And Lindsay is the program manager for the land program manager for the Nature Conservancy in Florida. In this capacity, Lindsay serves as the strategy lead for land use policy and directs the real estate and urban conservation programs for the Florida chapter of the Nature Conservancy. Lindsay is also an adjunct professor in the Department of Urban and Regional Planning and College of Business at Florida State University. Please welcome Lindsey Stevens.
Hey, everybody. Thanks, Denise. Thanks also to Renate Hixon and Joanne Tredenick, who is a TNC and Groundwork Jacksonville trustee, and both of whom thought that this would be a great discussion and help make this event happen along with Denise. So thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us today and giving me the opportunity to speak with you. A number of years ago, I had the opportunity to live and work in Jacksonville on what was at the time called the Preservation Project. And in the decades since the Preservation Project work, you can see the really great benefits of the remarkable investments that the citizens of Jacksonville made on conservation lands in not only within the urban core, but around the urban periphery. Kay just spoke about a really amazing neighborhood and regional scale project and the projects that Groundwork Jacksonville works on. And today I'm going to talk about how this important work connects with the landscape and global scale conservation work that the Nature Conservancy focuses on. So I just wanted to start today giving you a really brief overview of the Nature Conservancy for those of you on the call that may not be as familiar with our mission and our reach. So next slide. Our mission, we're a nonprofit organization. Our mission is to protect the lands and waters on which all life depends. Next slide. We have a global reach. We work across the United States and 79 other countries around the world. We're a science-based organization. We have a really robust science team that inform our work and direct our work. But we're also powered by working with our partners. We have a really remarkable group of trustees that work with us, a large membership base throughout the world, and of course our local partners who help us implement projects on the ground. Next slide. So despite being a really large organization, we do work at the local scale. We work in a nonpartisan manner. And we let the science direct our work and lead our work. We believe that you have to be solution oriented and try to step beyond really heated politics to come to a solution for the really challenging issues that are facing all of us today. And we're really looking to articulate the benefits to people and nature for our conservation work. Next slide. So touching down here in Florida, we have 4 flagship preserves that you all are welcome to visit at any time. Unfortunately, we don't have any in the Jacksonville metropolitan area, but we do have one down on the southeast coast of Florida. That's Blowing Rocks Preserve, which is on Jupiter Island. And this preserve was established back in 1969 when actual residents of the island donated 73 acres for preservation to the Conservancy. This property was protected because it has really unique rock formations, as you can see in the top left corner of your screen. And it also is a sea turtle nesting habitat. The preserve serves as a model for successful coastal habitat restoration. The next preserve we have is in Central Florida called Tiger Creek Preserve, and it's located on the eastern edge of the Lake Wales Ridge, one of Florida's ancient islands, when the coastline actually was in the central part of the state before it receded. Next is the Disney Wilderness Preserve, which is 12,000 acres and sits at the headwaters of the Everglades ecosystem, and it's located just south of Orlando. And then finally, up in my neck of the woods, I'm based in Tallahassee, and just to the west of where I'm at is the Apalachicola Bluffs and Ravines Preserve. It's about an hour east of Tallahassee and is located in a biological hotspot, which is unique to Florida and home to a disproportionate number of imperiled species. You can take a hike there on the Garden of Eden Trail, and you can walk along bluffs that are as high as 150 feet above the Apalachicola River. It's a really unique place. So come on out to the Panhandle and pay us a visit. Next slide. We're excited to be celebrating 60 years of working here in Florida. And this map shows most of our accomplishments since our chapter was established in 1961. This map shows a number or many of the projects that we've had a hand in over the past 60 years. And our fingerprints are on many of the parks and springs and preserved areas that we all know and love across the state. Next slide. Specific to your backyard in Northeast Florida, we do have a pivot. We have had pivotal role in protecting many of the areas that you're familiar with. Next slide. For example, Machaba Baloo, located up in the Timucuan Preserve. Next slide. Pumpkin Hill was also a project that we were actively engaged with our partners. Next slide. Ordway Swisher, which is further down a little bit closer to Gainesville, for those of you not familiar with that site. And next slide. The Osceola National Forest, where we've not only worked on conservation transactions, but we actively partner in management activities. Our approach to land protection has evolved over the past several decades to most effectively protect our most critical lands and waters. But now it has what we call three essential facets. Next slide. So in Florida, our land program consists of land acquisition, so acquiring conservation easements, full fee, simple acquisitions, or other property interests to secure property perpetually for conservation. We also work on policy with our government relations team and other programs and partners for developing smart land use policy. And then, of course, our real estate work. Annual monitoring of TNC-owned conservation easements, maintenance of our real estate records, and working with other partner agencies and nonprofits. Next slide. We work with landowners, donors, and government partners across the entire state to protect and manage land from the Florida Keys and the Everglades, all the way up to the St. Mary's River, and all the way west to the Perdido River in Pensacola. Our mission is very much connected to working with private landowners like Joe and Renate Hixon in the Jacksonville area, who we've completed conservation easements with over their private property for perpetual conservation use. These partnerships aim to collaboratively conserve our natural resources, restore habitats, and protect wildlife. We also leverage funding by donors with federal, state, and county program funds to acquire and manage land. However, as I'm sure many of you know, in recent years, government programs have not been funded as robustly as they once were once upon a time. It's changed a little bit with this last legislative session and here in the state of Florida, but by and large, fewer dollars have led the Nature Conservancy to become more focused on ensuring that we're protecting the most critical lands within a given landscape. Next slide. We're excited, as I indicated before, the Florida legislature just passed or just appropriated $400 million in funding for Florida Forever. We're really excited about this, as of course our many partners are. We're ready to continue to focus on the most critical landscapes, and the map in front of you shows priority areas for the Nature Conservancy in Florida in focusing our land acquisition activities to these various corridors. I note a few of them, like the light blue Ocala Greenway corridor is a little bit hard to see on this map. I apologize for that. But this does show our general priority protection areas. We focus our protection efforts typically on properties that are at least 500 acres in size for a fee simple acquisition, or 200 acres for a conservation easement. But of course, before we even get to the size part of it, we have to make sure that properties we're working on have a high conservation value. If a particular piece of property doesn't meet our requirements in terms of size, we do partner with other local land trusts, and other local organizations. And I know Jacksonville, of course, has Groundwork Jacksonville and other partners that are doing a really amazing job at the scale that they're working. So I'm going to shift a little bit and talk about some of our projects that we've worked on in recent years. Next slide. We're focusing a lot on Panther Corridor work, which is down in Southwest Florida. This is working with a number of large agricultural landowners to protect a interconnected landscape of habitat to ensure Florida panther survival. Next slide. We've also been focusing on larger scale acquisitions within recent years. A number of wins shown here on this slide. The first of which is the Bluffs of St. Teresa, located over here in the Florida Panhandle, as well as Lake Wimico, also located in the Florida Panhandle. Another acquisition right in your backyard, but right across the state line north in Georgia, is Cabin Bluff, which was a really large landscape scale acquisition. And then also Rafter T Ranch, which was a phased conservation easement in the Avon Park area of Central Florida. So when I speak about a high conservation value lands, what I mean are those lands that have biological, ecological, social, or cultural values of significance. So using the Bluffs of St. Teresa as an example, it's part of a larger watershed that feeds into the Apalachicola Bay. So protecting that land also helps protect the larger watershed, which is critically important to the Gulf of Mexico's seafood and tourism industries. Next slide. And here are a few of these. Lake Wimico shown on a few of these projects shown on the map. On the left is a map that shows the Bluffs of St. Teresa, as well as Lake Wimico, highlighted in yellow. And then on the right is the Rafter T Ranch properties, shown in the larger context of the Upper Lake Wales Ridge in Central Florida. Next slide. So while we've protected about over 1.3 million acres in Florida, we're going to continue this work. But once your land is protected, that's not the end of the story. We have stewardship and management efforts that are critical to long-term health and sustainability of lands. It's a huge part of what we do at the Nature Conservancy here in Florida and around the world. We work with partners, we train, we work side by side with other land trusts and NGOs to push the envelope, learn more, advance the science of land restoration, management, and stewardship. And with that, next slide. I just want to say thank you once again to Renata, Denise, Kay, the Garden Club, Joanne. Thank you so much. I'm really honored to have the opportunity to speak with you all about the Nature Conservancy, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Great. Well, with that, I'm going to go back to view so that we can see our speakers, and we will open this up for questions. I have a question to start us off, and I wanted to ask Lindsay, you mentioned the recent funding decision for Florida Forever. Can you provide some more details around that and how this impacts the Nature Conservancy?
Well, I think this is great news for all organizations in the conservation world, whether it's folks working in the urban areas or working on really large scale landscape projects. What it means is the Department of Environmental Protection has a lot more money than they've had in the past really 15 years or so to protect lands that have been determined to be high priority areas in the state of Florida. I know that, you know, we have a pretty well vetted list of projects under the Florida Forever list. But what this means is we may be able to really quickly act over the next several years to secure some lands that otherwise might be lost to development if this extra slug of money hadn't come through. So the details are still pending, I would say. There's lots of movement behind the scenes, not only the Nature Conservancy, but like I said, our many partners and other groups that we work with are actively providing input and feedback to DEP on that.
Thank you, Lindsay. All right, we have some questions from the audience. Patricia DeWitt asks Kay, other than hiring local workers, are there other plans for generating a feeling of ownership among communities next to the Emerald Trail?
Actually, we have involved residents from the get-go. So even when we were doing our trail master planning and we had a steering committee, residents from 5 different neighborhoods sat on that steering committee. Same thing with the McCoy's Creek project. We did visioning sessions. They're members of our McCoy's Creek task force. And at their request, they said, we want to become better leaders and mentors in our neighborhood. So we created what we're calling CREST. Don't ask me, it's a very long name, which is why we call it CREST, but it's actually a stewardship training program. And it's for both adults and youth that live in the McCoy's Creek neighborhood. So they're learning about the flora and fauna of creeks. They're doing creek cleanups. They're going on field trips. And it's really, I mean, our goal is that they really want to be owners and stewards of the space. And we actually now are working with that neighborhood to create an equitable development plan. And as part of that plan, one of their goals is to have environmental stewardship as one of their goals. So they're looking at both improving green and gray infrastructure. So it's really pretty cool. We also have a youth program for 13 to 18-year-olds. It's year round, so they do community fellowship during the school year. And then we have a 9-week summer program, and that is again about kind of training the next generation of environmental stewards. And they're actually getting their hands dirty in the summer by doing on the ground programs. Like they're going to have they're actually aquascaping a portion of a large city retention pond next to the S-Line Rail Trail as a demonstration project this summer. Fantastic.
All right, this next question comes from Carol Weinstein, or Weinstein, I'm sorry if I pronounced it wrong. This is a near and dear question to my heart. What can we do to educate people to stop throwing garbage into our rivers and parks? And I think both of you might have some, answers for this one. Kay, do you want to start off?
Can I just say that littering is one of my major pet peeves? We need another Lady Bird Johnson campaign, I think. Yes. On the McCoy's Creek project, what's good about it is that we're closing McCoy's Creek Boulevard because that's needed for the creek's floodplain, and the trail will be there. So they won't be able to drive by and dump anymore. And then it also is as we're cul-de-sacing roads that lead to that current road, we're actually building in litter traps into those cul-de-sacs, because a lot of times when trash cans get blown over and it's on a hill, the litter ends up down there. We're also going to look at placing litter catchers within the creek. We're going to determine where is the best place to put that so it doesn't get into the stream area that we're really trying to have be a great place for people. Getting people involved in the creek cleanups so that they can see how much litter is there all the time. It's amazing. But I don't have a full answer.
Yeah. Lindsay, do you have any suggestions or thoughts?
I think Kay hit a lot of the important points. I mean, as far as another ladybird, hey, I don't disagree. A public information and kind of lead by example. But part of it is also getting people to know and love their places and their communities. So, you know, that could be wrapped up in there. I was going to say they need their parents to teach them better. You know, when I'm driving around my community, I talk to my kids about, hey, why do you why do you think they do that? Or we go pick the garbage up on the side of the road. Some of it, as Kay mentioned, there's design interventions that you can take, and also providing infrastructure. So meaning proper places for disposal, amnesty days for electronic waste or you know, bulk waste. I think you have to hit that in many different levels, or on many different levels.
Agreed. I think those are all really great suggestions. And just my personal observation is that there are not enough places to put trash. And, you know, if you're trying to encourage more people to use trails, and, you know, that there needs to be places to put the trash, and you can't depend on the city to pick up all of them. So there has to be some public-private partnership so that, you know, more people are responsible for policing that trash. But that's just my soapbox. All right, so we have a question from Susan Smathers, who wants to know, what is a first magnitude springs?
Well, I can give you the kind of off the cuff. I am not the freshwater expert at the Nature Conservancy, but I do have you know, I have had some professional background working in a community that had a first magnitude springs. It's springs are scaled just on degree and amount of water output. So Wakulla Springs is the example that I'm most familiar with here in Tallahassee, but these are our flagship springs, and it's all based on gallons that are put out by the springs.
Great. Yeah, and it looked like Beth Strawbridge had an answer for her within the chat that said 64.6 million gallons of water per day, or 100 cubic feet per second. So
there you go.
For getting in there. All right, so I'm going to butcher this name, so I'm not going to try to pronounce it. But was Nature Conservancy involved in the effort to prevent the Florida Water Board from approving Nestle Corporation's bid to pump millions of gallons of water from Jenny Springs? Do you know the status of that effort?
So I personally, as I said before, I'm not the freshwater program manager in Florida, but as I indicated earlier, the Nature Conservancy does not typically get involved in specific advocating against specific land use decisions, or in this case, a water permit, unless it impacts directly a property owned by the Nature Conservancy or one of our preserves. But that being said, we do advocate for appropriate water resourcing policy at the state level through our government relations team. So while we did not specifically engage on the Nestle issue, because again, we don't go after, or we don't take a side, if you will, on specific permitting actions. We do work for sustainable water policy, sustainable land use policy, and other policies up at the state and federal level.
Great. So what is the relationship between the legislation that you mentioned in the Florida Wildlife Corridor Act, recently passed unanimously by both houses of the Florida legislature? Can you talk about that?
Sure. So Florida Wildlife Corridor is, you know, a geographic space in which many Florida Forever projects are located within it. So while I wouldn't say the Florida Wildlife Corridor encompasses all Florida Forever projects, much of the funding will be spent within the Florida Wildlife Corridor on on prioritized lands and prioritized areas. And for those of you not familiar with the Florida Wildlife Corridor, it's really pretty remarkable and many decades in the making act that in the Florida Wildlife Corridor essentially is to protect connected conservation lands from South Florida up to your neck of the woods and across the panhandle, so that wildlife can continue to move and thrive as the state continues to rapidly urbanize. So it's protecting the last green threads to make sure that wildlife can live and thrive.
Thank you. So we have a question for Kay, I believe. Are there plans to recruit local business sponsors to keep sections of the creek clean?
I would say yes. We have corporations that come out now and have maintenance days, bring their employees out. So I see that happening. I love the idea of a adopt a mile, but adopt a trail mile. So yeah, we hope to secure them as both donors and maintainers.
Yeah. This is a question from Garden Club staff, from Daniel, and I think it's a good one because you hit on this, but I don't think we covered it as extensively as we could. Is gentrification expected from the Mccoy project? And if so, is there a plan to offset the effects for residents?
Yeah, so let me just say that if residents get displaced, that is opposite of Groundwork Jacksonville's mission. I mean, our mission really is to help those folks stay in place and prosper. So we have been working with them for 3 years. And out of that, as the relationship grew, they were more willing to talk about their fears. And over 60% of the single family homes are rental properties, and that's how you get displaced. So we actually worked with them to create a 10-year vision for their neighborhood. And there are 7 priorities. Housing is, of course, the #1 priority. And we partnered with LISC Jacksonville on a planning grant from JP Morgan Chase that formed a coalition of community development financial institutions to also put together a plan that incorporates our equity plan. And they will make investments in housing and kind of growing entrepreneurship in that neighborhood. So it's not an easy process. It's we're going to need lots of partners, and we're going to need people talking out loud about the fact that this is potentially going to happen, and we all want to make sure it doesn't happen. So it's a huge effort that we are committed to.
Thank you. And that's an important element of the Groundwork mission, and one that I hear repeated in all the different ways that Groundwork is trying to offset any issues like that. All right. I do have one question for Lindsay, which is how do you determine if a particular piece of land has high conservation value?
Well, that's a great question. And we're fortunate to live in a state where we have decades of really hard science helping us identify critical and key habitat across the state through the University of Florida, and of course, many other conservation organizations. We work with ecologists and scientists from across the state to develop those prioritized lists of habitat. And all of that has been fed into the Florida Forever project process that I've indicated earlier. So to make sure that we're ultimately conserving the most key or the most critical conservation lands, as that's all based on the scientific research.
Great, thank you for that. I guess I would like to just ask both Kay and Lindsay to give us their kind of final thoughts, parting thoughts, so that we can leave here with maybe some action items, things that we should do as people who are interested in supporting your efforts.
Well, I'd like to thank Renate so much for thinking of us and having us be at this table. I want to thank the late bloomers for investing in the Emerald Trail Project. They are going to be naming a butterfly garden on the first segment, so we're thrilled about that. Parting thoughts. Well, I feel like we've come a long way in 2 years. We're about to construct the first trail segment. McCoy's Creek will be under construction. We now may have to figure out a new partnership with JTA that we're going to be working on. So even though we potentially have 132 million to build the trail, 132 million will not be enough to pay for the entire trail. And that the reason we are at the table and able to lead this project is because we have brought private dollars and grants to the project, and that will have to continue. So hopefully now that we have dedicated construction money, people will feel even more comfortable making private investments into the project. Because at the end of the day, our goal is to build a nationally renowned trail and linear park system, not mediocre, nationally renowned. And so that takes dedication, commitment, and money.
And
but thank you all. Thank you all.
Jacksonville is worth it. We are worth it. All right, Lindsay?
Well, once again, thank you so much for the opportunity. I think that the really cool thing about what we've talked about today is partnerships at all levels. So whether you're working at the 20,000 acre scale, or whether you're working at the, a 50 by 100 lot in an urban area scale, your dedication, your partnership, your commitment is what is key. And building partnerships with landowners, with agencies, with other nonprofits or NGOs, with the business community. It's all important, and we can't do this work without building those partnerships. And I think that's what we've demonstrated today. Groundwork Jacksonville, the Garden Club, the Nature Conservancy, we're all working on different pieces of this very intricate puzzle. And we couldn't accomplish the work that we do without those partnerships and without our collective dedication. So thank you all for doing what you do. And it's been great being here today. Thanks.
Thank you. And once again, I'm going to share my screen just so if you haven't seen the way to get in touch with either of our speakers, here's Kay's contact information, and I believe Daniel's going to add that to the chat as well. And here is Lindsay's contact information. And I do suggest that you get involved. It's so, there's lots of ways you can write letters, you can volunteer, you can get your hands dirty, whatever way that you want to get involved, there's a way. And I want to thank both of our speakers. I want to thank Renate Hixon for starting this whole process off and getting the Nature Conservancy to get in touch with us. That was so great. We love partnering with different organizations like this. We will be sending out a survey tomorrow to everyone, and we really want your feedback so that we know, is this the kind of program that you would like? What kinds of programs would you like to see in the future? So please take that survey. It's really important for us to hear from you. And once again, I'd like to thank the Jessie Ball DuPont Fund for making programs like this possible. And I want to thank, again, all of our speakers and thank everyone from the Garden Club who's here with us today, Daniel and Christina, and all of you out there for attending today. We could do this without you, but it would just be us speaking to each other, and that's no fun. So we really appreciate you attending and taking a break out of your day. So have a great rest of your day and a great week, and a happy Memorial Day weekend. And we'll see you next time. Thanks.